welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm much more familiar with Teams than Zoom, so I'm just fiddling around a little bit. Okay, so I've got the wrong slides up there, haven't I, as well? Got the wrong slides up even. Bear with me a moment. Sorry, this is a really good start, isn't it? So anyway, while I'm trying to find the correct slide, which is that one. Yes, welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. We've got a slightly different event than we usually have. So rather than having one speaker, we've got several speakers who are going to share their stories of their journeys through their careers in IT, their journeys to where they are, or some general sort of information around the issues around women working in the IT industry. So let's start again. Now I'm at the wrong end of my slides. Okay, so just to start with then, just a few messages from the branch. So just some around how we're going to work tonight. So we've got several speakers. It's going to be quite packed. So please make sure you've got your microphones on mute and video off during the presentations. Actually, I've got a question. You can add questions of any problems with issues with joining us or anything like that tonight. You can ask through the questions or the chat panel, but I've got a separate link for questions for the speakers to use, which I'll show you later. So be welcoming, respectful of others, understanding of people's differences, be friendly and patient, open to all viewpoints and questions, and be kind and considerate to others. So that's that. We do like to kind of get an idea of who's at our events, as that can help us in the future to plan events to suit everybody and to understand the nature of the people that are coming to see us. So there is a link there or a QR code that you can scan if you wouldn't mind completing our questionnaire. It is fully anonymous, and so nothing about you will be shared. Okay. So if you want to find out more about the Nottingham Derby branch of the BCS, there's a link to our website here, which has got our aims, committee members, information about our AGMs and upcoming and past events. And if you want to, you can join our BCS Nottingham and Derby LinkedIn group as well to keep in touch with us. So for our next event, which is going to be our first in-person event for a couple of years, and we're going to have this as a hybrid event where we're going to be streaming it at the same time as having people live, and this is on the 16th of May from 6:30 to 9 o'clock, and it is a joint event with the Leicester branch, the BCS, and CIISEC as well. And you can find out some more information and booking on the branch website for that. Okay, so back to tonight then. We've got several people speaking. Unfortunately, a couple of people have had to drop out at the last minute, so we've reorganized a little bit. So we've got 4 speakers in the first half. We're going to have Q&A, a short break, and then the final 3 speakers and a longer Q&A at the end. We're going to use Vevox for the Q&A session, and there's the links on the side. You can either go to vevox.app and enter the code 129283347, or you can type in that whole link there or scan the QR code, and then you need to go to the chat tab on that, and you can, if other people have put questions up, you can like their question, and when it comes to doing the Q&A session, I'll go through the kind of the questions that have got the most likes. And if your questions for someone in particular, please make sure you put their name on the question as well, so I can direct it to the right person. Okay, so I think that's it for me, and I'm going to pass on to our first speaker now, which is Eve. shall stop sharing and over to you.
Thank you a lot. And first of all, I am very, very happy that I can be here as a speaker. I'm just going to share my screen as well, which now should work. Can you see my screen now? So
Yes.
I am also going to bring you through my life. How did I get to where am I right now? And what were the rules, or maybe like some some aspects what I said that, okay, I'm going to follow these in my life so I can get to where I want. And one important thing is really to choose a path, or I call it a spark, which you would love to walk on. You should be open for new opportunities and never afraid of starting a new life, because it often happens that you must make changes on the fly. And remember, it's never too late to change your whole life entirely. For example, I started my studies as system engineer, basically IT support in Hungary. And today I am an AI engineer, even in a different country. And for most of us, it's not easy to decide what we want to do when we grow up. And that was not different with me either. On one occasion, I found myself not sure what profession to choose for myself in the field of IT. And then finally, I sat down and thought about what I cared about, what I felt was my strength. And as a little kid, I wanted to be a doctor, and I knew I was good at math, or at least, I was really interested in it. And I was good at programming. So I typed 3 words into the search engine: healthcare, mathematics, and programming. And the result was a new term at the time: data science. This became my spark. Being a woman in tech is not always a nightmare, I hope. For me, though, it was. And the biggest challenge I faced was at the University of Debrecen. Where I was studying as an engineer, and some of my teachers did not provide me the same opportunities as for men, because they said a girl should not study at this program. And I sometimes was not allowed to attend classes, exams, especially when I started my exchange semester in Copenhagen. Because in 2015, I participated in an exchange program. So I had the opportunity to try my luck in Denmark, Copenhagen at Pgce. And I really like the culture and that everyone lives their lives happily and calmly in this country. Furthermore, the method of training was close to me, as it focused much more on practice rather than theory. And for all these reasons, I decided to finish my studies here in Denmark, preferably in parallel with my Hungarian studies. And once the management of the Hungarian university allowed me to take another study plan, which was flexible in relation to attending classes and exams, so I could study abroad and participate exams when it fits me. But there were some teachers who didn't want to support me in my plans. And one of them expected me to go home every time for exams or classes, but I had no word in setting the appointments. And I really had to face all kind of crazy issues because I was a woman. And many times I felt like I should give up all my dreams. And I was already studying at the Faculty of Informatics at the University of Debrecen when I met Arpad Csík, who is a professor of mathematics at the University of Győr. And on one occasion, we appeared together at an event where I brought my first program for, at that time, for a quite new OS, Windows 8. And it turned out the event was organized by Microsoft Hungary, and they liked the program I wrote, so they invited me to an interview with the Hungarian student partner team. And after a few weeks, I became a happy member of the MSP program, which provided me or other students as well with lecture opportunities, access to latest Microsoft technologies, and you eventually become a Microsoft representative. And thanks to the program, I was in several schools in several parts of the country to motivate students with similar interests. And I have made a lot of new friends who have supported me in achieving my goals many times later. And once I was a happy winner of the Best Microsoft Student Partner Award, for which I was able to visit Redmond, the Microsoft headquarters, and the Seattle Stadium. So yes, many friends I made there and throughout my journey. and they always helped me, and we helped a lot each other when we were facing any difficulties in our career or everyday lives. So, never afraid of asking questions. Don't be a lone ranger. Successful people never reach their goals alone. So go out and ask for support. Fortunately, in today's world, you don't have to travel to another country to study. And there are many online learning opportunities, such as edX, for example, where different universities upload their resources. That's, for example, how I also graduated from the well-known MIT as a data scientist, also online. And as I said, I have always been interested in saving lives. So I chose to examine the earthquakes in Nepal in my thesis. And I want to play this video for you as well while I'm talking. So I understood, excuse me, I understood that the main cause of deaths was collapsed or damaged buildings. And based on the available data and information, I was able to present to the Nepalese government a proposal to strengthen buildings before another earthquake. And this disaster got so close to me, which until then was only seen on TV, right? That many conference organizers were interested in it, which allowed me to show my test results in several parts of the world. Then I realized that the purpose of my life is to save lives and improve quality of life with the help of available data and by leveraging AI capabilities. So thanks to my enthusiasm, I got a job at Leerdal. It is a company that aims to help doctors and nurses with various training courses, which include association methods, surgeries, and diagnostics as well. And this company is famous for its so-called AnyDoll, which helps people practice CPR all over the world. And my job at this company was to use the data available to support the work of those who plan the trainings. For example, if several people have made the similar mistakes in one steps, then it should be explained in more detail during the training so that doctors and nurses can achieve better results. And as in all areas, we are seeing serious advances in technology in healthcare as well. Leerdal's latest biggest development is in virtual and augmented reality. And I was very happy that I could participate in the project as a counselor and developer. At that time, for those who might have been knowing about me at that time, I was the HoloGirl because I was working with a lot of HoloLens projects. And I have another video here while I'm talking. And I don't need this. Yeah, so my main area was augmented reality, when your reality is only extended and used by the device. And I used Microsoft HoloLens glasses for this. Imagine like using the furnitures around you. And for example, you can take a holographic glass from the table or on the wall next to the TV. There are like, yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's, yeah, yes, good, thank you. Yeah, so like for example, you can see similar paintings like in Harry Potter on your wall, and you can also have your own holographic pet. It's truly a magical experience. And after the inspiration point, here is another important rule, is to find your platform. In addition to my work, I write articles and organize lectures on data science and AI. And because of my social activities and professional knowledge, Microsoft has awarded me the Microsoft Most Valuable Professional Award. And this title provides almost the same as the Microsoft Student Partner membership, but I am even closer to the latest Microsoft researches as well, such as reinforcement learning. And this innovative tech is mainly used when making video games. And I was also involved in the work of building an AI that is supporting a human player by learning from the gamer's behavior. It is amazing to have my code in some great games that are played by millions. And there are a lot of open resources available nowadays to develop in your domain, from online courses to blog posts and YouTube videos. And I deeply believe in education and sharing knowledge, for which is why me and my fellow MVP friend Håkan started our organization called AI42, where we invite professionals to explain various subfields of AI to those who want to get started in the field. And additionally, I am participating in many different conferences where I share my experience and knowledge, and finally in person again all around the world. And there are several different platforms which allow me to learn and educate, and the number of available resources are only growing. So go ahead, research your interest and check out various web pages, for instance. And once you find someone who you think is great explaining things, then follow them and take notes when needed, and don't be shy to ask questions. I worked my career through by setting goals and working hard for achieving these. A few years ago, I got a book from my mom as a gift in which I could write in my goals and dreams. And the previous big one I wrote like 3 years ago, which was to become a consultant in the field I love, data science and AI. And for more than 1 year now, I am a happy member of the Orange family, Avanade, where we support companies by applying Microsoft technologies to achieve their goals. Now, let's do this together. I would like you to close your eyes a little and spend a moment on emptying your mind and think about only one thing. What is your goal? What is that big dream you want to make true next? Think about what is the most important dream that you really want to get in your life. And when you're ready, open your eyes and just try to live by these few important rules that you see now, which will help you making your dreams come true. Find your spark, inspiration. Yes, you can do it also. Don't be a lone ranger. Find your platform and set your goals and never give up fighting for that. Because technology is part of our lives. In the future, we can expect much faster and smarter services around us. And wouldn't it be great if you could participate in world-changing environments? And with that, I hope that if you would like to get some support, you will think about me and reach out if you need any help or just some inspiration or something, then feel free to contact me. And with that, I want to say a big, big, big thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eve. That was fascinating. You've done some fantastic things. So if anyone does have any questions for Eve, if you just want to head over to the Vvox app and you can type them in there. The link is in the chat. I think Matt's put it up there so that everyone can access that. So I think next we are passing over to Melanie.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I already thought when listening to you, Eve, there's a lot of overlap and similarities that we share. Speaking of sharing, I'll try to share my screen. All right. So let me arrange my screen again. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. You're speaking of flexibility and being able to find your spark and what inspires you and picking the right things. With a big difference is that when I started my career, yes, I'm that old, it's more than 25 years ago, that I wasn't able to type in something into a search engine, just the stuff that I liked, and it spat out something that was valuable for me. That simply wasn't an option. And that probably, if I had started my career a little later, maybe that would have gone differently, and that would have made stuff a little bit easier. But nevertheless, it's a journey of 25 years in IT and of interesting stuff that happened while being in IT. And I would like to take you on that journey with me. So if I were to present my CV and how it looked, and I would make it really straightforward, there's just a couple of 4 major context points, I would say, that connect me with IT. And it started in the mid-80s because, and I think that's something that was very important for me as someone growing up, I had people around me that at very early ages introduced me to technology. So my father was somebody who was interested in anything that sort of was electronic, electric, had a plug. So these presents I got from my father were all around computer stuff and technology, which was fantastic because I had my own C64. My father brought home his work, so he brought his IBM PC, one of the first ones, home, crazy expensive, and I was able to and was allowed to help him with doing that, trying experimenting. My first experience around program with BASIC. And at school, I had one teacher who brought us into a course in computer science, which was a novelty at our school. And I was actually one of 3 girls. 2 girls quit in midterm, and I was the only one who stayed on the course because I thought that, yeah, I could do it. And it was just something that suited me quite nicely. And we started experimenting a little bit with programming around Pascal at that time, early stages, and we actually produced something that was used as a program, as an app by the school to organize sports events. So that was early success in that time. And at later stages, I accidentally, and I will show you how I did that, landed my first job as a developer, very unknowing that I wanted to be there because I thought it never occurred to me that IT was actually something that can offer me a career. Then changed later to freelance consultancy. So I worked as a software developer for companies who hired me to develop some sort of apps, programs, and then moved on to now being a Scrum Master and Agile coach and somebody who trains people on organizational development and helps Agile teams to make their first steps into agility. So I'm supposed to load some stuff. Yeah. So when I did my A-levels, it actually never occurred to me that IT could be some sort of career. And at stage, I did my A-levels in '93. That was not something that was normal. So it wasn't an option. That would be probably very different today. But at that time, I didn't have a clue what I'm supposed to do. And very much like Eve, I also thought about becoming a doctor because that really fascinated me, that saving lives aspect of it and looking at people and understanding what is wrong and fixing that. I didn't do that. I did an internship at a radio station for a couple of time. Thought, yeah, it's going all right, but I'd probably end up very poor. And I actually thought about making some money and being able to pay for a living. And so that wasn't an option either, wasn't so good at it. And I actually studied architecture for some time. And I wasn't very good at designing new houses, but I was good at understanding how things work together and planning that kind of stuff. So that suited me quite nicely, but nothing in that sort of directly led me straight to what I wanted to do as a professional. And then I thought I have to do something completely different. And because at school I was interested in a ton of topics, I couldn't possibly make an easy choice. So I thought, what did I like when I was in school? I liked English because that was quite easy. Lessons were fun. You could just read books and talk about them and write about them. So I started studying English. Politics because I was interested in politics, and Dutch because I spoke Dutch and I thought, yeah, I don't have to learn. Sounds very lazy and probably was. So I started that study, and that nothing could be further away from IT. That was my reasoning at that time. But I gave it a go and just started doing that. And then while I really enjoyed reading all that kind of fantastic stuff, Geoffrey Chaucer, and of course Shakespeare, Bronte sisters and Virginia Woolf, everything you have to read during studying English. One of the fields that I like most was when we're introduced to linguistics. Everybody ran the opposite direction, but I actually thought I'd like that. That's fantastic. It was a very structured approach of understanding how a language works and how you can compare 2 different languages. And I thought about, yeah, you can automate translation, that kind of stuff. That was in a time where Google Translate didn't even exist. So understanding that really fascinated me. I didn't make the connection between that and my later career yet, but that was some of a spark that ignited something in me. And then by chance, I landed my first IT job, which was a very poor one, but was the first connection back to that one. So my father went bankrupt and I was without financial support. At that time, I had to definitely land myself a job quickly. And the only option I had at that time was working at a computer store, local computer store, and just selling computers and consulting people and telling them what computers to choose. And I actually also built custom-made PCs. That was great for me for learning how that all set together and experimenting with that. So it was my first proper IT job. And it was okay. I earned enough money to sustain myself and could continue by my study. But then I, by chance, met a person, a friend of my later husband, who just told me that they were looking for people who can actually code. And I remember that in the late 80s and early 90s, I actually did some programming, very poor. And I just said, yeah, for sure, I can give it a go. Let's start doing that. And I landed my first job as a software developer. To the day, I don't understand why the people hired me, because the application actually landing the job was easy because the test was a joke, honestly, was so easy to pass it. Everybody could pass it, but so desperate was the situation because the companies all needed people to actually start coding things and developing so that I could sell applications. And so I landed the job there. And it was basically very painful trial and error. And I think basically every line of code was a massive bug. And I really had to learn it the hard way because, yes, I had no formal education in that field. And some panicking or factors that brought me very close to giving up was the lack of formal education, as I already said. I've only before that worked with some BASIC and Pascal in school and for hobby, and the learning curve is really steep. I would not recommend this to anyone else now, and I think it's virtually impossible to do that. Adding to that was I had no domain knowledge around software development in general and marketing, and we were a smaller startup that later grew to a significant size of 500 people before it was sold. And I wasn't aware of how to really do or satisfy the customer, how to understand customer requirements, good user experience, and UI design. Luckily, at that time, not many people in the area I worked in, that was e-learning and e-learning tools. We developed an e-learning tool at that time, had that knowledge. So we were all quite new to the game and we all learned from one another. And there were a couple of people who are really supportive and we all helped each other out and we learned where we go. We did a lot of knowledge sharing, that kind of stuff. And what was really nice to see, at least for me, in that developing context, software engineer context, no one ever questioned my status as a woman in there. And that was fantastic. It's just like the experience I had with my teacher and my dad. It never occurred to me that I, as a woman, was not capable of doing programming. That was just natural being in those teams. And that was actually a fantastic experience. So in later stages, what helped was professionalizing a little bit, of course. I learned, and I was thinking back of the linguistics at that time, that beautiful structure that I saw in a language is the same beautiful structure that you can use to write good code. So, and finding a structure in code and if you do certain programming, the code can look really nice and it can work together beautifully, and good code and beautiful code also prevents bugs. So the quality increases. And it really is at that point that I started to connect the dots between the linguistics and design patterns. That was why I liked it so much, identifying and developing a structure, and that makes a program work and makes a really nice program that users like to use. I was pushed then at later stages into freelance freedom, as I call it, because the company I've worked for a couple of years was sold to an American country, and they shut down the branch in Germany. So I had to find myself a new job, and I thought, because I had 3 kids at the time, or started to having kids, and we had 3 kids then, that being a freelance consultant would be offer me a lot more freedom, and it did. So I had a lot more freedom in self-organizing and contributing to companies that I liked or that I really wanted to work with and do short-term projects. But it also posed a lot of stress because of that factor of self-organization, finding the next project and that kind of stuff. I think what was really a drawback at that time, or was for me a little bit disappointing, was because I could not work full-time because of the kids, 3 kids. I still have the impression that my opportunities with that regards were a little bit limited in terms of career. At least at that time, and I hope it is improved now, it was what was not normal that as a manager or somewhere a leader in an organization, you would work part-time. And I've had a team lead position. I was a manager for some time, but as soon as I started working part-time, that was a thing of a history. And that is still something that is that needs some working on, and it needs normalization, that women can work in part-time better, because I don't think you need to be working full-time to be a good manager. And then at later stages, also what became apparent that, yes, I'm interested in technology. I like programming a lot, but at a certain point, it became a bit boring, to be very honest. I wanted to do something different, and I needed something that sparked. And for me, the introduction of Scrum, in a very bad and intentional, okay, that was introduced to me, that the environment we worked with Scrum at that time wasn't really good. The implementation of Scrum was bad, and I became really interested in understanding how a good Scrum process could work. So I started looking at that more in depth, and it really made me connect more dots. So I was coming from understanding how software systems work, and then I wanted to understand how teams work, how they can best collaborate and how they can create products. And then later stages, also understanding how companies work. So if you have a company who has many agile teams, how can you connect them? How can you connect them to an organization that is not agile? So a couple of very interesting questions that led me more into that direction. So my job today has transitioned from being a Scrum Master, someone who's helping teams with a process, understanding that very busy picture, don't read it, please, understanding how things fit together and how you can help teams to become better at their doing, create better products, and explore better ways of working together, to something that can maybe change organization in total. And again, another busy picture that shows you how much, for me at least, still is in there. And that is something that now sparks my curiosity. Why do organizations work the way they work? Why are organizations producing the products they produce? And how can they change to be better adaptable to the market? So for me, that was a very interesting journey, and I can't see the end yet. So there's more to come, and I will see more aspects that will spark my joy over time, I'm pretty sure. And it has, for me, it has proven that the flexibility is gigantic in that industry, and probably everybody can find the aspects that they really like and just do the things they are passionate about. So it's really worth diving into it and exploring what works best for you. So for me, it was really bringing together that I love fixing broken systems, and that can be a piece of software, but can also be a company. I'm curious about listening and hearing other people's stories. I want to understand how they tick, and it's about building something great and creating fantastic products within organizations you like to work with. And that is basically me. Thank you for following and listening to my little talk. If you are interested in getting into contact, just scan the QR code. It'll lead you to my LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, send me an email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Melanie. Again, really interesting to hear the change in your kind of focus over time from software through to teams and companies. So, okay, next we're going to pass on to Sorrel.
Hi, just bear with me while I get my screen in order. Right, so are we able to see my slides and not my presenter notes? Is that
Yes, yeah, just
good? Yeah. All right, thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sorrel Harriott, and I'm the Continuous Learning Lead at Armour Cooney, who are a cloud-first software engineering consultancy. And I'm here to talk to you today about why I think learning continuously is the best thing that you can do for yourself and your career. So I wanted to start this talk with a quote by organisational learning theorist Peter Singer, which some of you may be familiar with. And And he says, a learning organisation is a place where people are continually discovering how they create their reality and how they can change it. And the key things within this are the belief that we're not separate from what's happening around us, that we're all connected at the systemic level, and therefore we create the problems we experience. And that means that we can influence and change the system by gaining mastery over ourselves. And how do we do that? We gain personal mastery by gaining awareness, awareness of ourselves and awareness of what's going on at the systems level. And this is, I think, what makes learning a superpower, because it allows you to alter reality. So this is quite a philosophical thing to kick off with. So bear with me, please, as I try to sort of bring this to life a little bit over the next 10 minutes. So when we experience a problem, our efforts at solving it tend to be limited by whatever version of reality we are confined within. And it's only later on that we say, oh, if only I'd known what I know now. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but it's certainly something I relate to, and have. It's a narrative that I've fed myself many times over my career. Oh, if only I'd known what I know now, it would have gone very differently. But it's not a particularly positive narrative, I don't think. In my opinion, it doesn't really do justice to the journey. And it's, in my view, it's the journey that's important. I'm not sure where this particular quote comes from, but I quite like it. So I'm going to take you on my journey in my attempt to show you just how powerful learning can be and how it helped me to change my reality. So this is my school. There's nothing remarkable about it. It's a school, state comprehensive in North Yorkshire in England. It was quite traditional. The headmaster used to wear one of those black mortarboards and a cassock. It was badly funded, like most English schools are. I did pretty well in my GCSEs, but I didn't go on to do A-levels. I had quite severe mental health problems throughout my teens, and so the idea of doing A-levels was just out of the question for me. It was way too overwhelming. So instead, I chose to do a BTEC National Diploma in Music Technology at Leeds College of Music. I think I just found a flyer somewhere randomly one day when I was 15 or whatever, and I just thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. And my parents didn't argue. And when I finished college, I was 17. I thought, I'll move to Spain and work in a recording studio. I didn't know anyone in Spain. I didn't really speak much Spanish. But my reality at that time was quite detached from most other people's realities. And I love this this mug I found, this picture of this mug, because I think it sums up my thinking at the time. But in hindsight, I think the therapy would have been a much better move. But anyway, needless to say, my trip to Spain didn't work out. I think I lasted about a week, and I ended up at Hertfordshire University through clearing, thanks to my mum, who filled out an application form for me. She's like, oh, what are we going to do with her? And she did that in my absence. Now, I didn't used to tell people about my failed attempt at emigration because I felt kind of ashamed about it for a long time. I felt like that it was a sign of weakness, that I was a failure. But of course, now I can look back on that through a different lens, and I can see a different picture to the one I was seeing then. But the point is, back then, I didn't know what I didn't know, as none of us do. When I graduated, I got a job as a junior web developer, but I was still really struggling with my mental health problems, to the point that I actually couldn't function in a 9-to-5 job. You know, I could concoct all sorts of stories around why I was quitting my job and going back to university, but the reality was I couldn't really do it. So I did what a lot of mentally ill people do. I started a PhD. That's probably not a very politically correct joke, and sorry to anybody who's offended by it. But that was my reality at the time. So you can see, hopefully you can see that my education history is not typical. I didn't do A-levels, I didn't do a master's, but I still managed to do a fully funded PhD. And so we can tell a story around that too. So objectively, the story we can tell is that this is partially thanks to some professors who happen to be white male, as a lot of university professors are, at least they were at the time. And so they saw something in me and used their positions of influence to give me some really good opportunities. And a story behind that, which I was really quick to tell myself, and I did for a long time, was that I was a beneficiary of positive discrimination and white middle class privilege. Now that story is probably true, but it's not a positive one for me to hear. It kind of erodes my sense of achievement and self-esteem. So again, I needed to do some reframing of reality. So I learned to frame reality differently. I became more aware of my own unconscious biases, and I became aware of new data which can paint a very different story. So continuing on then, after my PhD, I went back to web development, and after a brief stint as an acoustic consultant as well. Now I'm going to tell you another thing that I don't tell many people. Well, that's changed as of today, that I was actually fired from both of those jobs. And for a long time, my internal narrative was, again, very negative. I'm not good enough. I didn't try hard enough. I'm a terrible person because I've squandered these great opportunities I was given, and so on. So once again, since then, I've learned to reframe reality. I have a different version of my reality now. So the reality is that those jobs weren't right for me. It wasn't me that was a failure. It was a relationship that had failed. The style of the leadership, the culture of the organizations, they were a poor fit, and I just didn't thrive in either of those roles. And probably I'm neurodiverse, but I didn't know that at the time either. So again, you know, very different stories we can tell when we gain a bit more awareness. So I went on from that to do a Pgce, and that was a really life-changing experience for me. So in case you're not aware, that's a postgraduate certificate of education. So it's learning to teach secondary school children in this case. And this was a time in my life when the act of learning became my focus as opposed to a background process. So I was really focused on learning the mechanics of learning. And I did my placements in secondary schools in Southeast London. And just to give you an idea of how challenging this particular course was, about a third of the trainees dropped out of my cohort. It was so challenging, but all the emotional resilience that I'd built up over the years served me really well, and I managed to get through it. And having done that, it gave me the confidence to do what I never believed I had it in me to do, which was to become a university lecturer. And I became a lecturer in computer science. And you know, this is me reframing my reality again from, you know, I can't possibly do that, to, you know, I can learn how to do that. I mean, what I'd actually said to my PhD supervisor just before I started the Pgce, when he suggested to me, oh, what about lecturing? That's exactly what I said. I can't possibly do that. It felt out of the question. And yet I managed to get there somehow. So this is a second university I worked at, Goldsmiths in London. And I wanted to tell you a side story about my time at Goldsmiths and Birkbeck. So I had my son, who's now 6, while I was working these 2 lecturing jobs, and I used to have to take him when he was 6 weeks old on the tube to deliver evening classes at Birkbeck, and I'd hand him over to a student that I'd found who would babysit him, and I'd breastfeed him in the break in the middle of the lecture, because you did what you needed to do. You know, I did what I needed to do to keep going. And I also, another thing around this is that I hid my pregnancy for quite a long time because I was afraid of what my bosses might say or do. Because back then, it's only 6 years ago, but it felt very different back then. I felt I'm powerless, I'm lucky to be here, you know, I'm lucky to have this job. I felt guilty, I felt apologetic about it. Whereas of course my reality now is different. I feel now that I have every right to pursue a career as a single parent, and that there are systems in place to protect me. And I'm mentioning it because even recently I've had friends that have expressed guilt or, you know, felt in some way apologetic about the fact that they're having a baby, and that just shouldn't be happening now. Like, nobody should be apologizing for being pregnant. So anyway, onwards, I went on and did a third lecturing job. I lectured in total for around 6 years, and I ended up running a new program in computer science at Leeds Trinity University, which was again really challenging, very different setup to at Goldsmiths. This is a completely new department. Well, it wasn't even a department, it was a sub-department, and they were trying to get a new computer science program going. But I kind of I felt like at some stage I'd reached the end of the line in academia, and I wanted to try something new. So that brings me to where I am now, which is at Cooney, where I lead on continuous learning. And my mission here is really to support individuals and organisations to learn continuously. And my way of doing this is by becoming an awareness agent. So I'm here to help others reframe their realities and to find the opportunities hidden in their struggles. And you can apply that at the individual, at the team, or at the organisational level. And it's a coaching and training role, and I really love it. I get to learn new things every day, and I get to see people growing and seeing things differently, which is really really great. And so it brings me back to where I started with my goldfish. He's not gold, he doesn't look very gold, does he? But I wanted to finish by changing the respective narratives here to something closer to what we see now. So the question on the left is one that I think we should all be asking ourselves every day. What's there that I can't see? And maybe if I'd asked myself this a few more times, you know, I might have seen things differently, but I didn't, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so the narrative on the right changes to this statement that is, I think, again, something I think we should tell ourselves every day. Look how far I've come, and I'm still moving. And I don't know where I'm going to go next, you know, because career paths aren't linear, you know, they don't follow a neat trajectory. I think, as the last talk showed, you know, most careers now, you know, they're very squiggly. So every day is an adventure. But I really believe that gaining mastery over yourself is the best thing you can do for your career and your life. And to do that, you need to be open to learning. And that's a mindset and a set of behaviours that you can learn. So if you want to know more, if you want to talk to me or learn how I can help you or your organisation, then I'm happy to talk to you. If you want to just get started on your own, then this is a good place to start. This self-coaching tips from Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis. And finally, we're hiring. So if someone out there is thinking, oh, actually, I fancy learning for fancy working for an organisation where people are supported to learn continuously, then we'd love to hear from you. And the person to get in touch with is Reka, our hiring manager. And that's me. So I'll hand back over to Bev.
Hand over to me if I can actually control my mouse. So thank you, Sorrel, for that very very honest talk there. I'm sure we can all relate to aspects of what you've been through up to now. So yes, thank you. And so finally, before the break, we're going to hear from Nina.
Yes, thank you, Bev, for organizing this great event. But I'm trying to share my document. Let me say thank you for doing this. I think it's a really important topic we're discussing today. And I'm already very inspired by the 3 talks before me. I also want to share with you my personal. Oh, what can I share? So I think it becomes very clear that I didn't start in IT. So yeah, so as I said, thank you for giving us this platform today, Bev. And yeah, my talk today focuses on my way from law to IT. And I want to let you in on what changed my perspective and what changed for me to make me want to encourage other women to join IT, and in particular to try to get into leadership positions in IT, and also how I feel cross-mentoring can make a change. So Sorel, you mentioned continuous learning. What we found out is that mentoring or cross-mentoring is one of the things where you can continuously learn. So I'm hoping to bring that topic a bit closer to all of you. So as the title already suggests, I didn't start in IT. It took me a bit of a detour to get into the IT. I originally studied law with focus on commercials. So none of it had anything to do with IT. And then I worked for roughly 10 years in various legal departments in E.ON and then in Uniper, two international energy companies. And by chance, I started in the legal department with focus on IT and data protection law. And this is what made me get a glimpse into IT and technology in general. And I never wanted to leave afterwards. So these departments, various legal departments, had very mixed teams, lots of women, lots of men. The leadership positions were usually filled by men, but I thought it's just a time this is going to change. And then after 10 years in the legal department, I took a chance to move to the IT and take up a leadership position there as a head of contract and vendor management. That was appealing to me because it's still, I still had touch points to my original job, because we are responsible for the negotiations, contract negotiations with our strategic IT providers. But on the other hand, it got me closer to the IT topics and really into the IT department. And this is actually where I realized that after being in the legal department where we had mixed teams in IT, this was different. What I personally loved, or one of the things I loved about IT, was that we have a very international team, and at a first stage very diverse because of different cultural backgrounds, different countries of origin. But one thing that is very apparent is that the gender diversity is not one of the strong suits in IT. So in Uniper specifically, we are taking stock on a regular basis, and we have at the moment 35% women. In Uniper overall, as an energy company, we have even less. But what to me is still the worst is that in the executive positions, we have less than 20% in IT. So this is something, as I mentioned, in the legal department, I thought this is going to change more or less automatically over time. But when I realized how the discrepancy is in IT, I thought this is not going to be changed just by waiting. So I decided to take up an active role in our diversity, equity, and inclusion community in Uniper, and in particular in the IT. And I thought, what can I, as an ambassador, do to improve this situation? And since my team is responsible for the relationship building with our strategic IT providers, I thought maybe this is a good way to start, to really learn how other companies are handling this, whether we actually have the same problems or whether it's just a Uniper one. Not surprisingly, it wasn't just a Uniper one. we all realized, I mean, the numbers vary a bit, but still the majority of people working in IT are male, and in particular, the leadership positions are filled by males. As Melanie already mentioned, some of it might be connected to the fact that some females would like to work part-time, but even that should not be a reason to keep it this way. So we thought, what can we do together with our strategic providers? And as a first step, we said this really is an important topic we want to bring to our strategy sessions and really put it in focus. In addition, also in Uniper, in the IT area, we thought this is a topic we need to address, and we set ourselves a goal called Gender KPI, where we're aiming to increase the number of females to 25% at least. And one of the measures we decided on was to say that every female should get a mentoring. And this is then together with our strategic partners that we thought, what can we do to combine, on the one hand, the topic mentoring, and on the other hand, that we want to do something with our partners. And this is how our initiative, the Cross Mentoring Initiative, was born. We decided to bring in mentees, mainly female mentees from Uniper, together with mentors from our strategic providers or strategic partners, or vice versa. You might ask, why is that? Why do we see this as a good step forward, or how this can improve the number of females in leadership roles? And we have looked into studies, and we have at least seen quite some promising studies that show that mentoring can not only increase or help increasing personal growth of a mentee, but also career growth. And we try to really found out what would be the best way to start. And unfortunately, there's still quite a few studies that show that mentoring is more an accelerator for career growth for men than women. There are lots of reasons why that could be. One is that still females are often mentored by mentors on a lower management level, while usually the mentors on a more executive level are then mentoring men. Also, the style how people are mentoring females are often quite different. And there's still reasons that, women quite often, as a phenomenon that, of course, doesn't apply to all women, but there is still the phenomenon that some females don't even apply because they feel they don't tick all the boxes. I'm not sure if some of you are familiar with that. Somebody tells you would be great for that role, but you feel you only tick 8 out of 10 boxes, while a man is a lot quicker to apply. So what we've seen in studies is that some of the mentoring can improve the confidence, and if that would lead to more females applying, I think then we're already halfway there. If more women apply, I'm sure more will also get the executive position or the position they are aiming towards. So what we've tried to do is take all of this into consideration when we set up our initiative. And what we put in focus is really the mentee and mentor relationship. And we want the mentee to choose and to pick the mentor. So we've set up kind of a dating profile style where the mentor is filling out a questionnaire where they not only talk about their specific skills and capabilities that they'd be happy to share with the mentee, but where they also give a bit of more information about their person, so that based on that, the mentee can choose what mentor would be best to suit their needs, and where there would be for them more easy to open up than maybe with another person. Since we feel the relationship is the most important part of that mentoring, we decided that we also need to support that matching process a little bit, so to give guidance before organize meetings, maybe even some speed dating. That was an idea brought to our attention a couple of days ago. I quite like that, to increase the chances that really a trust-based relationship can be built. What we feel the cross-mentoring brings to the table is that it takes out the hierarchy that you usually have in a mentoring inside a company. And we hope that this will support getting the mentee and mentor to build that trustful relationship quicker or more easily. Yeah, we are at a stage where we're trying to launch the pilot. This is supposed to start in March. I'm personally also writing a master's thesis as part of my MBA studies about this topic. So I could talk about it for hours. I know that we don't have the time. But if you're interested, I'd be happy to get all your questions or also have an exchange with you afterwards. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Nina. It's really interested and definitely keen to hear how that pilot goes. I think we might be talking to you about mentoring as well. So okay, yes, we have overrun a bit. I think I was probably slightly mean in giving people 10 minutes and unrealistic in that. So I think what we'll do to try and catch up a little bit of time, if we just have a couple of minutes break now, quick comfort break, stretch your legs, look away from the screen for a few minutes, and then we'll start back in, so 5 minutes time, and we'll have the next 3 speakers, and then we'll do the questions at the end. So if you have got any more questions, please add them. If you haven't looked yet, have a look at the questions that are already there, and like any that you really feel like you want answering when we get to the questions later. Okay, so I will see you back here in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back everybody. So we'll continue on with our next 3 speakers, and first up we have Rabina. Hopefully Rabina's back. Yes, there she is.
Dare move just in case. I didn't dare move just in case.
Over to you then.
Lovely. Right, I'm just going to get ourselves in a position where we can do some constructive. Okay. Right, can you see that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
That's great. Okay, so One of the things I think most of us take a look at and we've come across is that there is gender bias. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to have a little look at things from a slightly different perspective. Ideally to say, well, okay, yes, it's there, but what can you do? And that will be from both an interviewer's point of view and an interviewee's point of view. So my name is Rabina Sangera, and I'm actually an early careers advocate for BCS Women. And I'm also an early careers advocate and an education liaison for BCS Nottingham Derby, who are hosting today. Okay, just to give you a quick breakdown, those are some of the areas that we're going to take a look at. They're not in that order because, you know, why should I make it easy for you? All right. So when we talk about gender bias, what do we actually mean? We actually mean that there is a disparity in the way that people are treated. And it's through the way in which certain attributes might be perceived, and those perceptions are typically related to the gender. So we look at these things and we think, well, okay, what can we do? What do we need to be aware of? Well, the reality is that we are in fact all biased. No one's actually saying that you need to admit that you're biased, but what you do want to be in the position of is, can you identify on those occasions when you may be biased? Are you aware of some of the things that you might be linking that might be unfair to the individual that you're linking them about? Do you have the capability to reflect on what you've actually said or done in order to realize that you may have some bias? And would you be willing to accept that you are biased and therefore you've set yourself a baseline from which you can actually develop? And that's what we would really like to see. So this isn't about pointing fingers and saying, well, these people aren't doing it right. It's, could you fix it? Do you know how to fix it? Can you at least be aware of it enough to know how you might improve the situation if you had an opportunity to do so? So one of the areas that actually listed this and my interest in particular, and this came from a report that was generated in about 2011. And this has been fairly widely shared, so I would expect most people to have seen it. And it's the evidence that gendered wording in job advertisements exists and sustains gender inequality. And it was about the fact that the way that a job advert might be describing certain character traits or characteristics or skills that they might be looking for were in fact masculine coded or feminine coded words. And what that meant was that some words would attract one gender and some words would actually repel the gender. And in a way, some of those words would actually change the way that you would actually be able to hire or who would actually apply for your jobs. So if, for example, you're an organization and you've put an advert out there and it is more heavily masculine coded than you would have intended, then you're not going to get the diversity or the range of people that you might have hoped to get. So sometimes that narrowing can happen right at the beginning, and it can be because there is that bias in the wording that you may not be aware of. Kat Matfield is a developer who actually created something called the Gender Decoder. And here you can actually just drop your advert in, and it allows you to then think about whether or not some of the ways in which you've coded that might change who actually applies for your job. The thing is, as an applicant, you might also then say to yourself, well, I can do the same. Because sometimes there's things that might switch you off from applying for a job, and you may not be fully aware of why it doesn't feel quite right. Well, go and have a look at the advert. What's actually preventing you from doing it? Is it the way that those words are actually set up? If another word had been in its place, would it have generated the same kind of feeling? So it's preventing you from doing something that actually you've got the full skill set to do. So think about whether or not that's something that you might want to review. Think about whether or not you might want to actually apply for something you otherwise might not have actually had a go at. And the reality is, even if you have 60% of what you can see there on the page, go and have a go at it. You know, it's not going to do you any harm. The worst that can happen is that you don't get an interview, which is the exact same position you're currently already in, but you might get an interview, which tells you that you're probably not viewing yourself in the way that others might be viewing your skill set. Sometimes it helps to have that feedback and then be able to develop the rest from it, even if you don't quite get the job. And this was apparent in one of the studies done by the Harvard Business Review. And there's QR code there for you. There is actually a link in the PowerPoint that I'll share with you later. And typically men will be quite happy to apply to more jobs, even if they've only got maybe somewhere between 60 and 70% of the skills, whereas women will normally wait until they have 100. The question is, why wait? If you know that you've got the majority of what's been asked for, have a go, see what happens from there. Reframe the advert. So one of the things I said earlier was that if it's coded in a particular way, if there is a heavier emphasis on certain aspects of the skills, it might be just the way that they've actually described it. So if you reframe the advert, you look at what those skills are, you think about how it might be worded, how you might be able to improve yourself based on that, you might actually find that you match it better than you think. But typically, it's not just going to be the advert. You might need to reframe your CV. So you might need to think about how your CV is actually set up. What words are you using on there? Is it words that describe you as well as you could be describing yourself? Is it something that's actually describing you in a way where it's actually holding you back because it's changing your perception of yourself? Gender bias is something that happens across all genders. And equally, it's about how we perceive ourselves. So if the language that you're using is actually having a negative effect on you, you're going to demonstrate that in other aspects of what you're doing. So typically, what else can organizations do? So if you're somebody who's going to be asking for people to apply to these jobs and you're just not getting the diverse range that you were hoping for, what do you need to look at? Think about what you've got. You've got all that codification taking place in your adverts, it's in your public information on your websites, on any of the literature that you put out, it's in your branding, and it might be in your culture. So it's about the way that people are actually describing what you're doing and how you're doing it. And if they're describing themselves in a way that is putting other people off, you're just not going to get the applicants through that you want. But let's say you do get an applicant through. Let's say they're sat there in front of you, they've made it to the interview table. What's the first thing you should do? You put the word bias at the top of your paperwork. You can't change the fact that you might inadvertently have certain gut feelings, but those gut feelings are going to be led by your perceptions, certain biases that you might have that are a little bit more related to things that you perhaps wouldn't want to be aware of. But having said that, you might want to then think about, well, how can I prevent some of that? Just by putting the word bias on the top of your paperwork reminds you to think about what you put down and how you put it down. It also helps you remember what kind of things you can ask, how you should ask that question. So what are you asking? Would that question be suitable for all candidates? Did the answer to a question elicit a feeling? Make a note of the feeling as well as the actual question itself, because you'll want to remember how you felt when you answered that question, or how the interviewee answered that question, because it gives you an indication as to whether or not you had an emotion attached to that was perhaps not suitable for the way that interview needs to take place. Now, one of the reasons why that can have an impact is sometimes we take notes as we're doing the interviews, we put a couple of words down, we have a certain response, but if you have a feeling, make a note of that feeling too, because what that will do is it will give you a bit more of an awareness about what's happening. In a University of York study, the simple act of listing the pros and cons about different interviewees made interviewers aware of how many negative comments were being attributed to women compared to how many were being attributed to men. So create an evaluation form. When you do note pros and cons, make sure you compare them. You'll see very quickly whether or not you're introducing bias when you hadn't actually intended. Think about your evaluation notes. Review what the notes are that you've actually made. Ideally speak to other panel members, but not until you've actually completed a review of your own notes. What words did you choose to describe a candidate? Can the attributes be reframed? Can it be done so it's less emotive? What other terms could be used for descriptors? If she was a he, would you have said the same thing? If he was a she, would the response have been appropriate? Or could you have done it in reverse? If she was a he, would the response have been appropriate? So that gender bias can also impact men as well as women. So it depends on how you're actually applying some biases that you may have. when that person's in with you and you assign a mentor, make sure that they get the same advice across the board as you would expect to have for all of the people that work for you. So the career advice you probably didn't get is a TED talk by Susan Calantuano. And it's about what she calls the missing 33%, the advice that women typically don't get when they're mentored as part of mentoring practices. And it's about what's not being added in terms of their value, that they don't quantify their skills, they don't get the same sort of financial information, they don't get access to the same thing, because the mentoring process focuses on things like confidence, assertiveness, how to put yourself across, as opposed to this is what you need to make sure that you're putting on your CV, this is the kind of thing you need to talk about when you're in your appraisal. It's a very different emphasis for women than it is for men. So think about what that missing 33% might be. Can you actually ensure that in your mentoring process, that's actually being engaged with? I really didn't want to say that. And just to get you started, I've given you a mystery toolkit for change. Each one of these QR codes will take you somewhere different. All of them are actionable points that tell you what you can apply in your organization in order to reduce gender bias in your hiring processes, and also to think about how you can actually support people in your organization so bias isn't introduced. One of the books I would recommend is something called Inclusion Nudges Guidebook. It's basically a book on how to do exactly what we've just been talking about. So it takes inclusion nudges for everybody. So it talks about a diverse range of people and ensures that it puts in place different types of small minor changes that can be put through all of your organization in order to actually reduce bias. And a couple of the things there, that second reference in particular is brilliant. That is a list of lots of different papers on different aspects of bias. And if you would like to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me elsewhere, but I'll never reply, so that's your best bet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabina. I think that's it's interesting how slight changes in language can have a big impact on how we think and feel about things.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so next up we have Hannah. If you're ready.
Yeah, just got to get it set up.
Excellent.
Awesome. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, can see that.
Okay, awesome. So before I begin, I would first like to thank Beverly, you and the BCS for allowing me to speak here today. I think it's extremely exciting to be able to be in the company of such inspiring women here today. I think teenage me would sort of be losing her mind at the moment. So as for my presentation today, titled Curiosity Killed the Cat, it'll cover my personal journey into tech and what it means for me to be a new generation developer, alongside the very important lesson I learned along the way. So prior to beginning, I think it's important that I sort of introduce myself a little bit better. So I study computer science, games technology at Nottingham University. I'm also currently on placement with Next as a mainframe developer, which basically means I work with modern versions of old technologies. So things like COBOL and JCL. Outside of work, I run a tech society here at NTU, which is one of the largest societies at the university at the moment with nearly 700 members. I host workshops, I teach, and my personal favorite, I work on a lot of tiny little projects on the side. As you might have guessed, I'm also a huge nerd and gamer. So my weekends usually comprise of myself and my friends hanging out, playing board games and all that jazz. And speaking of games, that is sort of where my personal tech journey begins. And I think it's important to reflect on it as I sort of go over how I started to my learning moment. So picture this, it's almost over a decade ago, and I'm sat in the dining room table with my sister in my great-grandmother's house. And we're having this really intense discussion over how we would change up this game that we were playing at the time. And we were coming up with all sorts of plot hooks and interesting bits and pieces. And in walks my mother, who sort of gazes upon this beautiful mess that we've made, just incoherent scribbles all over the place. And she looks up at us and says, why don't you do it yourself? Why don't you make it on your own? And up until that moment, my career aspirations were sort of fleeting. It swayed back and forth between being an actor, an engineer, a lawyer, but that moment solidified it for me. That's when I realized that this was the industry that I wanted to be in. This is where my passions lied. Time skip a couple of years, and now I'm sort of preparing to go off to university, and I'm looking at getting advice from a bunch of counselors, family and friends, and all of them insisted that I needed to find my niche. I needed to find the specialist area that I would commit to for the rest of my life. And naive me at the time was like, oh, I really like games, so I guess this is where I would go into. Little did I know that this would be where my problem moment would stem from. You see, I define myself as sort of a tinkerer. I like to build things. I like to learn about things. If I hear about something new, I have to Google it immediately. And fortunately for me, tech is the perfect place for this, because you see, tech is sort of like a midpoint between itself and literally everything else. If you look for it, you can find the beautiful connections that tech has with every other aspect of our day-to-day lives. My personal favorite example is technology and psychology, because researchers now are coming up with the new therapies based on technology, because they found that their existing methods didn't work as well. We've got tech in art, tech in medicine, and so on and so forth. If you look for it, you're going to find it. Yet, as an industry, we still insist that people who go into it, we need to specialize on this one. We need to pick one thing to master. Sort of like, oh, I want to be a C++ developer. That's it. I'm going to stick with it, and I'm going to commit to it for the rest of my life, which isn't inherently bad, but I do believe it sort of blinds us to the potential that this industry has in terms of its fluidity, what it can offer us through its ability to connect all sorts of not directly related fields. So as I mentioned, being a tinkerer means that I personally am not built to master one single thing. And this posed a problem for me at university in my first year, because I kept telling myself that I needed to only focus on games. I was here for games, and that was where my priority should have lied. And I struggled to be motivated, and I sort of developed an imposter syndrome moment. I had self-doubts because I just couldn't find the will to carry on with this course. And when I would recognize that I'm not a master of anything, I'm good at bits and pieces. I realized that, I wasn't good at like one particular thing. I would start to compare myself against all of these amazing developers that I was surrounded by. And I questioned whether this was the industry for me, whether I fit in, because it seemed like I didn't. And that's when I made the active decision to embrace who I was. I was a tinkerer, and this was my learning style. I needed to fiddle with different bits and pieces of tech to be able to learn, to be able to propel myself forward. And that's what I found worked for me really, really well. And it's because tinkering gave me this inherent adaptability to different situations. And it's what's led me to all of the successes that I've been fortunate to have in this industry ever since. And being a woman in STEM, being a woman of color in STEM, means that you get thrown all sorts of ridiculous scenarios just all the time. And there's this expectation that you're just ready to adapt to it at any given moment. And being a tinkerer meant that I was ready for it. I was prepared to pick up any challenge that was thrown at me. And it's sort of because flexibility is key within our industry. Everything changes every other day. There's new bits of technology popping into the forefront of the industry almost every hour of the day, pretty much. And as we see companies fade in and out of relevancy based on the economic landscape, we're obviously going to see tools as well kind of be put on a pedestal, suddenly knocked off the next couple of days. And as tech enthusiasts and people within the industry, it can feel daunting to believe that, oh, should we master all of these things? Should we know about all of these things that are constantly happening? Well, no, and there shouldn't be an expectation for us to do so. Instead, what I sort of recommend is picking one single thing and pursuing it to whatever depth that you wish to pursue it in. So my example is as I study computer science, games technology at university, I decided to look into mainframes. Because you hear about it a lot in our media, sort of like, oh, he's hacking into the mainframe. And I was like, well, what in the world is a mainframe? And that moment of curiosity and that learning journey that I took led me to landing myself a placement role at Next. Other examples of mine include learning about cybersecurity on a whim over the pandemic period. I just decided to learn about it because I was like, oh, well, I kind of want to get on that hacker vibe, you know, as a young developer, kind of fit into that bit of the stereotype. And that's where my interest led me. And so though it may seem that I'm picking up information that don't necessarily directly mesh together, what I've found is that it made me a better developer. And that's because I've got all of this information to draw on and then apply directly to whatever relevant work I'm working with. And that makes me more flexible, more adaptable to whatever I'm working with. And it just changes up my working style to be more efficient. And a personal favorite example is when I learned about open source intelligence gathering, which I like to call a fancy word for Googling in cybersecurity. If any cybersecurity professionals are in here, don't shame me. And so basically I learned how to reverse image search and use very specific Google search queries to be able to pinpoint certain articles and things I was looking for. And I now use it every time I'm looking for research for my university work, for when I'm looking up a question about programming for work. And it's made me such an efficient developer because I can pinpoint something immediately within seconds rather than popping in just a normal phrase into Google and then spending ages scrolling through all of the pages that are available. Now, I recognize that everyone's learning styles are going to be different. Our circumstances and our experiences are unique. So you might not entirely relate to what I'm saying at the moment, but I do dare you to be curious. Because as the famous unfinished saying goes, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Be curious about something that catches your eye at any given moment. Sort of if you find yourself kind of going, at something, look it up. Because you might find a new thing that entices you, that intrigues you, and perhaps even game-changing for your entire career. Because technology is designed to enable curiosity. It's designed to allow us to learn more things. And in the age of information, where everything is available at our fingertips, it's never been easier to learn something new. As my mentor from work, Ben, always says, every day is a school day. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. Because we don't have to be a master of every single piece of thing, topic area you pick up. We just got to master a bit of the fundamentals of something that you are aiming towards, a goal that you have. And then what's beyond that is entirely up to you. You can pursue it to whatever depth you wish. And perhaps even become a jack of all trades within the industry. And that's the very important lesson that I learned. Thank you very much. Yeah, here's my socials if anyone would like to connect.
Thanks, Hannah. That was great. Really, really interesting and motivational. Thank you very much. And we're looking forward to having you back in
back at university. Yes, indeed. Yeah. I'm looking forward to being back.
Okay, so on to our final speaker now, which is Riz.
Hi there, everybody. Let me just set my stage. Right, give me a shout if you don't see my screen.
I can see it fine, thanks.
Sweet. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this talk, to be able to give this talk at this event. Kudos to the organizers for putting on such a fantastic event. The lineup was mind-blowingly good at what they conveyed. And I'm sure people will go away inspired and motivated to change. I'm here to share with you my early career self-reflections, and these are courtesy of my rational and emotional feelings and thoughts. But before we can begin, let's kind of rewind back a little. So I was born in 1998, and that puts me at the end of the 90s kids, just near the end. And moving on from 1998 very swiftly to 2010, this is the year I was prescribed glasses after being absolutely blind and having to squint at the chalkboard, being unable to read anything on the board. The precise date I got my glasses was the 12th of October 2010, which I remembered very distinctly. Summer sounds so subtly serene while we wreck our eyes behind a computer screen. At least the sun is shining somewhere. That is a poem I wrote during that time. And for me, that was a real telltale sign that I would end up in an industry that requires so much of our time just staring at a computer screen. Moving on from 2010 comes the year of 2016. This was when I moved from a desert country, Saudi Arabia, to the UK. This move was obviously a giant move, and it was full of exciting things to be discovered, but also a very sad time to be leaving behind a home and a country that I'd been so used to. But I moved to Nottingham to pursue a Bachelor's of Computer Science at Nottingham Trent University, being taught by Beverly, which is a very cool experience, would recommend. And as part of my course, there was a placement year, much like Anna has mentioned in the previous talk. I joined a small agency, about 10 people. They worked on primarily craft websites, and it was around 10 people company. And I used to commute to Lincoln from Nottingham, so that was about 2-hour journey spent on the train. And yeah, once I'd finished my placement came the year that I don't want to speak a lot about because it was 2020, and this was the year that I graduated. And yeah, I guess that's all I can cover about this year. That was the only thing that happened. After that is now. So currently I'm a customer success engineer at a unicorn startup based in San Francisco. And I work at Whistle, which is known for being the creators of Next.js, which is a React framework for production. So that is my timeline in somewhat clarity. In between, I've also been a designer, and I have started an initiative with a colleague from university where we teach people who belong to underrepresented groups programming in Nottingham. So if you're interested in free sessions to get upskilled in programming, please reach out as well. But that's me in a nutshell. And this talk was inspired by crossing almost 1 year at work. And I wanted to put a disclaimer just to be sure that I told you that these learnings, which I want to share, are based on my feelings and observations, and obviously a bucket load of 2 a.m. thoughts and feelings. So many of them you might not you might not find revolutionary, but to me they came up as epiphanies, but take it as you will. Obviously, one of the main kinds of learnings that I experienced were these kind of learnings where I spent 20 minutes wondering why this array only had one item. True story. So these kind of learnings I feel will carry on no matter what stage of my career I'm at. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to the problems that eat away at your time But more than that, the learnings I wanted to share were at a level that anyone could relate to and take away from, no matter their skill level or their seniority or whatever job they did. And the first one that I want to share with you all today is the atomic composition of work is ordinary. Now, you might be wondering what I mean by that, and that's what I want to share. So I found that after working at Vercel for a year, is if you zoom out enough, you'll see that you can simplify work to simply being things said and done in the company of others. And I came to realize that my ability to suggest ideas, voice doubts, invite feedback, embrace critique, hack solutions, iterate together, be confused, ask questions, answer questions, celebrate others, track progress, all of this was the primary thing that constituted what it meant to be working. This was the primary thing. I don't know about you or how common this is, but when I was a kid, I always assumed that working per se was something that you acquired after years of education. And what you did at a job was completely scientific almost, that anyone outside of your work would not be able to understand what you did. And I've come to realize that that's not actually true. All these things are personality traits. They're kind of little things. They're the ordinary things that when done well become extraordinary. And as a fresh grad, I just had no idea. I just thought it was all about the code and the frameworks and all these other things. But all of that is secondary. A lot of your time is spent just doing small, ordinary things, but trying to do it to a level of finesse and perfection. The second thing I learned was that the curation of context is never ending. And this depends, I feel, on the size of your company. I primarily worked at small to medium-sized companies so far, but the act of context driving, context finding, I think can be summed up into curation of context. When I joined Vercel, we were in total about 50 people, and now we've grown more than 200 in a space of 1 year. And with that kind of hyper growth that startups usually feel, there comes a time when you really realize that the importance of context is difficult to describe almost, because it's easy enough to share information, but to curate important information and share it in a way that is digestible, understandable, is an art form of its own. And one little nugget that I want to share with you in this kind of context, pun intended, is don't confuse extensive documentation with insights or spreadsheets with analysis. So I'm sure we have people at work who are able to fill up Excel sheets or Word docs. But people who meaningfully share that information, there isn't necessarily an overlap. Definitely documentation plays a part, but the act of curation is what I wanted to call out here. And able to see this kind of skill set and appreciate it is something that I wish the industry did as a whole. And the third thing that I want to share is that the choice to first test the water is astounding. What I mean by that is something that I would like to credit my career coach with instilling in me. When I asked her what was the one thing she wished she knew when she started, this is what she said, that she wished that she tested the water in numerous occasions. And this kind of goes against what you feel when you have freshly graduated and you're ready to make an impression and you want to solve the hardest bug, or you want to ship the fanciest feature, or you want to help the largest number of customers in a night, in a day or night. And it goes against that ideology almost. It's like you don't have to impress or you don't have to think big. In fact, you shouldn't be thinking big. Just because you spent like 400 hours working on something doesn't mean it intrinsically has value. With teams, priorities change, goals change. So what's important is if you have an idea for that 400-hour project, try to break it down to the smallest nugget and share it with your team and see how the feedback from that is. And I feel like that was a learning that took me almost a year to get right. As programming is also a wonderful metaphor for this almost. You know, you don't start with shipping a giant app or something. You start with the smallest piece of code, just a few sentences here and there, and you validate your idea before you ship the entire thing. So I would definitely recommend testing the water in any kind of project you take on. Just ship the smallest possible piece and see what happens, see how people react as well. This isn't just about work, it's also about getting buy-in from stakeholders, for instance. And yeah, with that, those formed the 3 learnings that took me a good year to understand and distill and be able to word into meaningful, life-changing, hopefully insightful pieces of information. And I'd be very interested and also highly recommend that you sit down one day and you just kind of have a ponder and think about what self-learnings or moments of clarity you have gained over your vast career. And this can be at any point, and figure out what makes work meaningful and fulfilling, because without it, it's so easy to burn out. So if you have anything you want to share with me, I'd be very, very interested in hearing it. Please reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at RizBiscuits, or you can also note the website on the footer of not the slide, but the previous slide, rizwanakhan.com, if you want to get in touch. And thank you again for listening.
Thanks, Riz. Always great to hear your thoughts and your way with words there. So thank you very much. Okay, that's the last of the speakers. So if we could just have a virtual round of applause for all of our speakers there. And I shall head over to the questions. We've got quite a few questions, but we're not going to be able to get through very many because we're running out of time a little bit. So let me just order them. So yeah, a couple of statements at the top there. People appreciating the international flavour to the event, and a thank you, which I agree with, for sharing your personal stories to all of our speakers. Unfortunately, a couple of our speakers have had to leave earlier, so we've just got 5 left now. Okay, so next question. As a woman in tech and IT industry, do you feel that your position at your company is helping to change the narrative men or women have against women like you in this industry? Now, if anyone would like to jump in with that one.
I can give it a start if you want. Excuse me.
Yes, thanks, Melanie.
I think it does. It's just because we need more women in positions in IT, just they need to be visible so that it becomes normal. There is a position you can actually get to. And that's why everybody's contributing to that. Whatever you do in there, it becomes normal that there is a woman also doing a certain job. And that's just was a byproduct probably of what at least I have done, just being a software developer in the industry, and then being a role model for others who are wanting to do that. And it has become more normal. I see more women doing that, and I probably wouldn't be the only woman in a team as I've been in the past now in any development team. That has changed, and that's fantastic already. It needs more improvement for sure, but that was a contribution that made.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to answer that one?
I agree, nothing to add.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. So next one. What do you recommend for those that want to learn to code in their later years? Anybody, any thoughts on that?
So I help volunteer to teach at something called Code First Girls, and it's this organization that runs free coding workshops for anybody that's interested, especially women and non-binary folk in STEM. They have courses ranging from web development, Python, and I think SQL now. And it's usually like an 8-week course, 1 hour per week. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on?
Yeah, I don't know who if you're interested in gaming, there's a couple of online games, programming games you can play to actually do something for Python or for other languages. You can just play around. You have sort of a task to fulfill, and you have to code your way towards your goal, which is good fun. And you can do that with kids, and you can do that with grown-ups. It doesn't matter. It's just gamified learning of programming.
I would just add saying, find a community that helps you. Sometimes it's not so much about the tech, it's just having a listening ear, someone to point you in the right direction. And I don't think age, maybe this is something that I don't get to say right now, but I don't think age matters in the grand scheme of things, because the problems, the ways that programming annoys us is pretty similar. Nothing has changed in that regard. It still is quite annoying in different ways, but it's still annoying. So I don't feel like, thankfully, tech is open to any age, because we're kind of annoyed in the same ways, if that helps.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Where have we got to? Who brackets female inspired you most in your career? It doesn't have to be anyone famous.
I already have one, if I can give her a shout out for when she watches this later. My mom, so I was fortunate enough to have a woman in STEM in my own house, because she was sort of the project manager for the early systems and stuff in the Malaysian international airports. And so I always just had tech at home to fiddle and tinker with. And she was like my motivating factor to be, invested in this field. She kept saying, be curious, explore these things, tinker with it. And she's sort of been my background supporter for every single thing that I do. It's great. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Anybody else want to answer that one?
I mean, it now sounds a bit boring, but it's, for me, it's similar. My mother also was somebody who worked her entire life, even when I was small, and that definitely showed me that it's possible to do that. And was, I mean, she was born in 1949, so a completely different time, and really had to fight to get her parents to allow her to study. So for me, that was quite easy then, and rather expected that I study. So that definitely, had a huge impact on me.
I would say teachers in general, any kind of teacher who stuck around this field. Being in Saudi Arabia, it was even worse, because it was so hard to find talent and resourcing for teachers there, especially female teachers. And being in an all-girls school, you weren't taught by males, basically. So that made it impossible to access any kind of learning. I had a teacher who, in retrospect, wasn't a great teacher. I wasn't massively fond of her then, but it was, I guess, it was great that she stuck, because she too didn't enjoy teaching. She just kind of fell into it, because teaching a IT field was very hard, but also working in an IT field in that culture was almost impossible. So she then just chose teaching as the default, which was lucky for me because it wasn't, I guess it falls into that idiom, beggars can't be choosers. I couldn't choose to have a better teacher because this was a teacher I had, and that's it. You didn't get to choose. It's like you didn't have the luxury of choice of shopping around. And so just her being there, her just being, having that job meant that I could do ICT. I couldn't even do computer science. I could just do a flavor of computer science, and that was still worth it to me. So I guess any kind of teacher who stuck around, no matter the challenges and no matter their interest in the job even, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think one last question then. As women in this field, do you feel that it is harder to break into the industry or work your way up to higher positions in the field?
Maybe it still is. I have to admit, I had a side chat with Nina because at a certain point, inspired by one of the talks, I took a screen grab from our company internal social media, which showed, because contract negotiations, building new business, there was a photo of basically all men and just one woman in there. And it's just the round that makes the decisions at the very top. So the C-suite, that's male dominated. And that is still a problem, like Nina said, especially for us. I don't know if that's a different story in the UK, at least in Germany, it's still the bigger the company, the harder it gets to really get to the top. And look at DAX. So there are very few companies that are led by a woman, and that's still a problem. So at the bottom, sort of, mid-level management team, yeah, that's possible, but getting to the very top is still hard.
I've not yet had a woman manager, so I just don't know what the experience is like or how it differs. You just kind of default, if it's a manager, it's going to be a male, and that's still pretty unanimous. So yeah, it is still tough, and you still need your support network, and you still need to play to your strengths.
Okay, right. Well, I think that's covered pretty much all the questions anyway. I think some of the ones that were left are kind of similar to other questions. So hopefully everyone's got the answers that they wanted. So thank you all again for agreeing to take the time to do this. I hope everybody else has found it as a kind of motivationally inspiring as I have. I think it's been great to hear so many fantastic stories. So I'm going to give you another round of applause, and thank you to everyone coming to that's come to listen, and hopefully we will see you at our next event in May.